In 2011, a truck with a family in it was sucked up into a tornado.
But that wasn't the craziest part.
No, the craziest part was this. Just moments earlier, two mysterious beings suddenly materialized in the backseat.
Hello, and welcome to Velarcana. Here, we share mysteries that often defy explanation. I research the cases, and my husband tells the stories.
And this one begins just as that family was getting into that truck.
So we got in the truck to get ready to take Lage home, and my grandpa said, he's like, hey, I'm going to stop by Home Depot to get the wiring for the garage.
Grandpa is Rodney Lillard, and it was Sunday, May 22nd, 2011. Rodney, his wife Sharon, and their two grandchildren, Lage and Mason, had all went to church that morning. Then they had enjoyed a bit of horseback riding and fishing, and now they were about to head to Home Depot so that Rodney could pick up some wiring for a project that he was working on. The drive from their house in Carthage, Missouri, to the Home Depot in Joplin took about 20 minutes, and although dark clouds were rolling in, and this area was known for tornadoes, no one had any idea that in just about a half an hour, one of the most devastating tornadoes in all of history was about to touch down in Joplin.
This was a massive tornado. We're talking well over a mile wide, on the ground for, 22 miles, I believe, or on the ground for 38 minutes. This thing took a hard right turn, which is probably one of the hardest right turns, at least I was ever able to observe from modern radar data.
When the family got to Home Depot, Sharon and the kids decided that they were going to stay in the truck while Rodney went inside to take care of his business. So Rodney got out, shut the door, and then headed toward the store. For a while, the family talked, enjoyed the radio, and they really didn't pay much attention to the weather until the clouds began to thicken. And even then, at first, they didn't think that the situation was going to become dangerous. Sharon even mentioned how they just might get some much-needed rain. But then, the cell phone rang.
My aunt called and was like, hey, there's a tornado over Joplin. You guys need to take shelter now.
So Sharon ended the call, and then everyone got out of the truck intending to go into Home Depot. Or at least, they tried.
And I told the kids, I said, well, let's see if we can get out. Well, at the time, I couldn't get out. The wind was just not letting me out.
We can't get out of the truck. And that's where where we're panicking at this point.
And then everything went ominously dark.
Okay, this is getting a little scary, especially since the sky started turning black. This is becoming serious.
So with no other options, all Sharon could do was hope that the truck was heavy enough to keep them safe from the tornado. It was, after all, a 1992 F-350, and it weighed over 5,000 pounds. So with any luck, maybe the tornado would just pass them by and they would all stay safe. Sharon told the kids to get off the seats and onto the floorboards.
And I said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to scrunch down here and we're going to pray.
So we moved into the middle of the truck.
While Sharon and the children were all hunkered down in the center of the truck praying, Rodney was inside of Home Depot and he was completely unaware of the approaching danger outside. But then the ambiance of the store changed and all of the clerks went into emergency mode, and one of them came up to Rodney and told him that a tornado was approaching and that everyone needed to go into the back room to take shelter.
And I said, well, I got a wife and family out there in the truck. And he says, well, we'll go get them, but I need you to go in this room.
So Rodney went with a group to wait out the storm, but no one ever did go out to get his family. And just moments later, it got really bad. In the front of the store, one of the employees, 59-year-old Dean Wells, was making one last round when he spotted a group of people just outside of the store banging on the glass, begging to be let in. Just behind them, well, it looked like something out of an apocalyptic movie. The skies weren't just dark, they were black, and the winds were blowing so powerfully, debris was everywhere. Well, Wells couldn't turn them away, so he unlocked the front doors and was nearly blown back by the wind as everyone rushed past. There was this feeling of absolute doom in the air. So the clerk shouted that they all needed to get to the back, and then everyone headed that way. But about halfway through the store, pieces of the ceiling started dropping onto the floor, and the group looked up and was overcome with the knowledge that the roof could go at any moment. And then just a few steps later, sure enough, a powerful gust of wind blasted through the building so hard that it busted the front doors, shattered all the windows, and it pulled the roof right up off of the store as if it were a piece of paper. The trusses came crashing down, and the walls collapsed. And the poor souls who had just been let into what they thought was the safety of the store were instantly buried beneath a pile of concrete slabs and steel beams, and none of them survived. When the moment finally passed, the only part of the store that was left standing was that room that Rodney was in, and of course he rushed out immediately to find what had happened to his family. And when he got outside, well, the truck was gone. While Rodney was inside of Home Depot, watching the store being ripped apart, Sharon and the children were, of course, out in the parking lot. They were all hunkered down in the center of the truck. And as they were praying, they could feel the truck sliding around on the asphalt. And then, a second later, the wind just took complete control.
It flipped on its side, and then it was sucked up into the vortex of the tornado, and then it was kind of floating in the vortex, upright.
Mason said that the truck was being whirled around inside of the tornado, just like the Wicked Witch of the West was in the movie The Wizard of Oz. The only difference was that the truck was being pelted by debris from every direction, and the windows, of course, were the first to go. Shards of glass went everywhere, and then all types of tiny objects filled the air, traveling hundreds of miles per hour. All the while, Sharon and her grandchildren are all holding hands as tightly as they can in the center of this truck. And then a piece of wood lodged itself into Sharon's back, and she passed out. After what felt like eternity, the truck landed, upright, on its wheels. They'd all find out later that it had actually been thrown all the way across the parking lot, about the length of a football field.
And I didn't wake up until I felt the truck bounce.
Back inside of the store, when everything finally calmed down, the very first thought that Rodney had was, of course, of his family.
We crawled out from underneath all that debris, and I ran around and tried to find the truck. And I got around there, and no truck.
On the other side of the parking lot, piled up with a bunch of other cars and covered in debris, Sharon, inside of the crushed cabin of the truck, started calling for her grandchildren.
My grandma's hollering at me, and I'm trying to figure out what just happened. I'm like, where's she at? I can hear her. I can't really turn my head that much to see.
The reason why Mason couldn't turn her head was because there was this 1-inch thick piece of metal that was literally running through her body, pinning her in place. This angle iron had been ripped off of Home Depot's roof, and it had lodged itself through her arm, through her abdomen, and it was sticking out of her back. Well, she and her grandmother reassured each other that everything was going to be okay. But Lage, he was no longer in the truck.
But I heard him outside the truck. I don't know if he's dead. I don't know if he's just that badly hurt. I don't know anything. And so I start yelling for help.
I could hear Mason, so I got looking around, and my truck was in Home and Gardens.
Eventually my grandpa comes up, and then he saw the bar that was through the roof of the truck and through me, but he didn't know how far it went. And he said, Mace, we're going to have to wait for help.
Eventually, help did show up, and they realized that Mason's situation was a bit worse than they had thought.
When they opened the door, using the jaws of life to open the door of the truck, they realized that it was all the way through me.
They actually had to use a saw to cut through that angle iron, and of course, as they were cutting, it vibrated through Mason's entire body.
It was very, very painful. It felt like 5,000 bees stinging me at one time.
And of course, once they got her free, well, the bar was still inside of her, and it had to be surgically removed. And that couldn't be done until they got her to the hospital.
When they were getting me out, they had to do it a certain way, obviously, because the bar's still through me.
Now, in case you're wondering, let me just quickly share what happened to Sharon and Lage. Sharon's injuries were relatively minor. She suffered some cuts and bruises, and a 4-inch piece of wood actually had lodged itself into her shoulder. Lage, unfortunately, was not so lucky. At some point, he had been pulled out of the truck, and he was lying semi-unconscious when Mason's grandfather showed up.
He got out of the ambulance, said my grandson wouldn't make it. His skull was completely busted open.
Sadly, part of Lage's skull was missing, and his brain was completely exposed. Well, he was immediately taken to the hospital, but unfortunately, shortly after he arrived, his body was taken to a makeshift morgue and it was placed with the rest of the fatalities. But his story didn't actually end there. A miracle happened with him, and we'll share what that miracle was in just a minute. But first, do you remember when I said that the craziest part of this whole thing was that right before the truck was sucked up into the sky, 2 mysterious beings suddenly materialized in the backseat? Right after the skies had turned completely dark and the wind was pushing the truck around in the parking lot, Mason said that she saw 2, what she described as angels, materialize in the back seat.
It was kind of sliding around, like in the parking lot. Like we weren't up anywhere, but it was like kind of moving the truck slightly. And I felt something touch my shoulder, and I thought it was my cousin, thought it was Lage. And I look up, and there's 2 angels in the back seat, one by me and one by him.
So I know your mind must have been racing. There's a lot going on, right? But didn't you find it just a little bit odd that, like 2 beings just materialize out of nowhere?
I was kind of confused, if I'm going to be honest, of on how they got in there, why they were in there, who they were. And then I kind of felt more, and then in a sense, I felt a calming sense. Either I'm going to be fine, or this is the end. And then it got sucked up into the vortex.
Mason said that that feeling of calmness stayed with her through the entire time that the truck was up in the tornado, and even while she was patiently waiting for someone to come and cut that metal bar and remove her from that seat. But for some reason, the feeling changed when she got to the ambulance.
And then once I got to the ambulance, it just felt eerie.
That eerie feeling wasn't just isolated to Mason. Many people all over Joplin said that they felt this darkness come over the city, and we're going to get into that in just a minute. But first, and I'm sure you probably already know this, Mason wasn't the only person to experience what she called angels that day in Joplin. As a matter of fact, children ranging from about 4 to 14 all over the city had similar experiences. A lady named Laura Pena, a mother of 7, was at home when the tornado hit. Having nowhere else to hide, she gathered her children and they all ran into the closet and closed the door. Sounds of utter destruction came through the cracks as they just huddled there together in that dark room. And then the tornado ripped this big hole in the ceiling above them, and it really did feel like it was the end. But then, suddenly at the last minute, this sense of calmness came over everyone.
My son said that he saw a lady dressed in white covering the closet hole. He said that he saw how debris kept hitting her over and over. He said she just kept looking at him. Somehow, she was communicating with him.
Later, when the family emerged, they found out that the only part of the house that was still standing was the closet that they had been in. In the middle of this chaos, a 4-year-old little boy vanished. Presumably, everyone thought that he was sucked up in the tornado and he was thought to have been dead. But once everything calmed down, a deputy sheriff found that little boy in a field nearly 6 miles away. And when asked how he got there, he said that angels had carried him there and set him down. In another account, a man and his son were in a pickup truck, and the tornado was approaching, and the wind, it literally picked up a car and it hurled it toward them. But suddenly, just a fraction of a second before it hit them, it changed directions and missed. Well, the father thought that they were just lucky, but the little boy claimed that he saw 2 winged figures actually smack the car out of the way at the very last second. There were so many of these accounts from children that the city actually built a monument about the butterfly people in Cunningham Park.
The butterfly people. As the tornado lifted, the stories began. Stories of butterflies, butterfly people or angels that protected children from the storm. The stories were many and miraculous. While there were many different accounts, the following three are representative of the miracle that happened on May 22nd, 2011. A father laid on top of his daughter in the yard, grasping at the grass to keep them both down. His shoes were pulled from his feet. When the storm lifted and they were both unharmed, his daughter simply said, "Daddy, it was okay. A butterfly was holding us down." A young girl was lifted into the air by the storm, but a butterfly quickly wrapped its wings around her and brought her safely to the ground. Without a scratch, a child in a car seat emerged from a car filled with glass and debris. When safe from the wreckage, the child described a butterfly wrapping its wings around him, protecting and making him feel safe.
That's pretty powerful, inspiring stuff. And after this horrible disaster, the city of Joplin has drawn strength from children's mysterious experiences. And as they've moved forward, they've chosen to focus on these good invisible forces. But according to several people, there weren't just good invisible forces in Joplin that day.
And then once I got to the ambulance, it just felt eerie. Everything was quiet. You couldn't you didn't really hear sirens going off. You didn't hear cars honking. You didn't hear traffic, which is weird to be in a city and you don't hear traffic.
This eerie feeling stayed with Mason all the way to the hospital, and later, one of the elders in her church told her why she had that eerie feeling.
It's an old deacon at our church, and he came up to us, and he said that he had a vision the night of the tornado, and that there was 13 dark angels.
13 dark angels have set their sights on Joplin, intending to bring total destruction, and they will not be stopped entirely. But opposing angels of light will come to help humanity.
Supposedly, this tornado was guided by dark forces. In Mason's case, the deacon told her that she and her family would have died had angels of light not intervened. And on a side note, do you remember how I said that Lage was thought to have been dead? Well, a nurse was walking through the morgue when something gut-wrenching, yet miraculous, happened, and it nearly scared her half to death. As she was moving through this sea of dead bodies, one of them, Lage, opened his eyes, and then he started screaming. She later said that his screams were the most blood-curdling screams that she had ever heard, and she'll never forget them. Lage was taken into surgery, and he went on to make a recovery. After hearing about the deacon's statement of dark forces, Amy did some digging, and in 2005, a man named Harold Campine, founder of Family Radio, predicted the end of the world using mathematical clues from the Bible. He said that his calculations showed that the second coming of Christ would happen on May 21st, 2011, and starting the following day, the day that Joplin had that tornado, disaster after disaster would ravage the earth. He believed in this so strongly that he actually spent over $100 million in advertisements trying to warn the world. Well, interestingly, a group of young men living in Joplin who were followers of Campine's predictions decided that they were going to have an end-of-the-world celebration.
We got together and had a huge party. We called it the Staying Alive Party. The world was going to end. It was going to cease to exist, and we figured we'd just drink until the next day. It's a little ominous to think that we were all just celebrating life 24 hours prior to the worst disaster that could happen.
Well, Christ did not come and the world did not end. But some people believe that this tornado did mark some type of a cosmic change, and humanity is now living in different times. In 2023, the Metaphysical Podcast posted an episode titled Mysterious Joplin Butterfly People Revealed. In the episode, remote viewer John Vivanco said that there were indeed beings of light working to protect humanity, and they were interacting with children during the disaster. Interestingly, he said that these beings of light were actually all one being on a higher dimension, but appeared as many different separate individual beings from our plane of existence, which I thought was fascinating. But when asked about the tornado, John said this.
When you get to this tornado, we see that there's a darker mind behind it. There's a darker consciousness that seeks to take advantage of chaos. It's a mind. It's a consciousness. And this being sought to take advantage of the condition that was forming that day in Joplin in order to cause pain and suffering. This was not a natural event. It started off naturally, but it became more unnatural as it went. This dark mind did this in order to grow and cause chaos and suffering.
He went on to say that some may consider this mind to be like devils or like a satanic consciousness, but it was definitely evil in nature. He also found it interesting that there was like this cosmic battle happening between good and evil.
And it's interesting because on the polar opposite, you've got the butterfly people, the angels, who are trying to resolve some aspects of suffering around this thing.
Amy also found dozens of posts on platforms like Reddit and Quora and others from people who swear that they heard first-person accounts from people who were in Joplin that day and saw dark spiritual forces all over the city fighting the light in some type of a huge cosmic war of some sort. But when she dug deeper, she was unable to verify any of those sources, so we're not going to include anyone here. As I was assembling her information and getting ready to share this with you, she reminded me of a report that we had done in the early days of our sister channel, Rope. I believe it was our 5th episode, and it is not interesting at all. We were very green back then, and I recommend that you don't check it out. But in that report, Amy found numerous accounts of otherworldly winged creatures all through history. Obviously, there's the biblical accounts of angels and demons, which of course dates back thousands of years, and there's tales of strange winged creatures that come to us from several primitive tribes in Africa and Australia, and these beings have been seen in modern times as well, like the sightings of a strange creature flying over Bristol in 1909. Those sightings went on for days, and they were reported by hundreds. For some reason, these sightings often take place around disasters, like the Joplin tornado. In 1978, a winged creature was seen at the entrance of a mine in Freiburg, Germany. An hour later, the mine collapsed. And I'm sure that you're familiar with the otherworldly creature that was spotted flying around the Silver Bridge in Point Pleasant, West Virginia on December 15, 1967. That bridge also collapsed, and it killed 46 people, and tales of the Mothman sprang out of that one. In 1986, several witnesses adamantly claimed that they saw a huge winged creature flying around the nuclear power plant in Chernobyl, Ukraine. Just days later, the plant had a meltdown. These accounts go on and on. So, what really happened in Joplin, Missouri? Well, most people say that it was just a horrible act of nature, just a mindless tornado that ripped through the town and nothing more. Well, stick around and find out what Amy and I think about this disaster in our DNA segment. Next.
I know what I saw, and I'm not afraid to hide it.
This one was absolutely gut-wrenching to me for so many reasons. One is the grandma telling the story about, here's her grandchildren in the back of the truck, and it's the danger is astronomical, and there's nothing you can do for your grandkids. So being a mom, being a grandma, my heart just broke for her, for that situation. But also, I grew up in Iowa, Tornado Alley.
Yeah.
So I am familiar with what that train sound that everybody talks about when a tornado is coming. It sounds like a train.
Oh, wow.
It actually does sound like a train. I remember going to the basement I can't tell you how many times, covering my head, covering my kids' heads with a mattress and waiting it out.
Yeah.
I remember one particular bad one that came through our town, and I walk outside afterward, and of course, kind of not like Joplin, not that kind of debris, but yard debris is kind of everywhere. And I look at this big oak tree in our backyard, and I'm thinking, well, that something doesn't look right. The tree, which was huge, had actually twisted.
Yeah.
Of course, eventually it died. We had to cut it down. But it just speaks to the absolute destructive power of these things. It's incredible.
One of the fascinating things that I found with this mystery was what the remote viewer John said about the angels. He said that on one level, like in a higher level, all the angels were just one being. But on this plane of existence, we saw them as individuals.
Yeah, that's crazy.
How is that possible? Can you figure that out?
I don't. This, to me, it's like, so is he saying this one being split off, almost factioned off into these separate pieces of light, which the children then called butterfly people?
Right.
That, to me, that's kind of how I interpreted that.
Yeah.
So what did you think about that? What do you think about the children and their butterfly stories?
What do I think about this mystery?
Yeah.
So it's difficult for me, right? Because when I think back to like ancient times in Greece and primitive tribes throughout history, it seems like every natural disaster was a demon or a devil, right? There's a reason, there's a god for this one, a god for that one. And science comes along and shows us that no, the wind just formed this way. There's an updraft, a downdraft, things spin around, and then, it just happens to take place where there is civilization. And then we're just in the path of nature. At the same time, it is strange how so many little kids under the age of 14, I guess, described seeing the same type of thing.
Right. Yeah.
And then all through history, there's a lot of reports like that, all the way back to biblical times. And they describe these beings with wings. So I don't know, it's difficult. So what do you think? Do you think that there were really otherworldly beings that day there in Joplin?
I don't know if they were otherworldly. I don't know what they were, but I do believe the children saw something. And they used the term butterfly. Mason, I think, used beings, and she talked about light, maybe angels. I don't know, but I do think they saw something. Absolutely. Yeah. And this story, it reminded me of another story that I've heard about transparent beings. Beings that you can see through, beings that seem to move very quickly. It's unexplainable. And we, as you know, did a complete report on that. And if you'd like to see it, it's here.
It's actually something that happened to people close to me.
Yeah, I didn't want to give it away, but hey, you should.
Yeah, pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah.